What is up, my friend? Welcome back to the basement. I am Mikey Henninger. This is Basement Brewed Fantasy Football, my mom and your mom's favorite fantasy football podcast. This is episode 24 of the Basement Brewed Fantasy Football podcast, and today we are going to cover 27 players to consider adding to your fantasy football roster both before and after waivers run on Wednesday. No need to worry about writing these down or trying to remember everything that I say. In the description of this episode, you'll find a link to an article where I've listed all 27 players and the reasons why I am considering adding them to my Week 12 fantasy football lineups. Now, before I dive into everything, I wanted to let you know that I do, at the end of this episode, have a very special offer for you as a way of saying thank you and as a way of somewhat apologizing, because Friday I will not be able to put out the episode that I usually do, which is my favorite and least favorite plays of the week, lovingly known as the hit list or shit list. It will be Black Friday. I will be spending time with family. So at the end of this episode, I do have a very special offer for you to consider. So keep an ear out or keep an eye out if you're watching this on YouTube. But without further ado, let's dive in. So like I mentioned, we have 27 players on this week's list. 27 players for you to consider adding to your Week 12 fantasy football lineup both before and after waivers run on Wednesday morning. Now, the reason I do it this way, if this is your first time listening to one of my waiver wire episodes, understand that my philosophy when it comes to the waiver wire is that I'm genuinely pretty frugal when it comes to the waiver wire. I do not spend waiver priority, and I do not spend blind bidding dollars unless I am absolutely certain, or at least fairly certain, that the player I am bidding on or placing a claim for will be in my starting lineup at least some point in the near future. If it's somebody that I think might just be a bench decoration and somebody that's just nice to have on the bench but doesn't actually ever see my lineup, I'm not going to waste any sort of waiver priority or blind bidding dollars on them. I would much rather save those dollars or save that priority for somebody who could potentially help me win weeks or even win leagues. So the reason that I write that is why the article is written the way that it is. I want to let you know players that I think are worth claiming and putting priority on. But I also want to let you know that there's usually 20 to 30 plus players that I'm considering adding to my fantasy football rosters, depending on what I need, right? It depends on my running back situation, my wide receiver situation. If I need a quarterback streamer, tight end streamer, I always stream defenses. So there's 27 players in this week's list for you to consider, depending on your league sizes, your roster, how desperate you are at certain positions. I'll cover a few here today, and then the rest you can find in that article on basementbrewedff.com. Again, the link is right in the description of this episode. Now, I mentioned that there's one player this week, or maybe I didn't mention this. In the cover of the episode, you'll see there's one player in my mind that is actually worth priority. He's worth a waiver claim. The other 26, I would wait until after waivers run. That one player that is worth a waiver claim is Latavius Murray. So Latavius Murray is rostered in just 24% of Yahoo leagues, which I think is surprising considering he's been getting plenty of playing time for the last several weeks. But now we have Mike Boone still on injured reserve. Chase Edmonds got hurt in week 11 and is expected to miss multiple weeks moving forward. And the Denver Broncos just released Melvin Gordon, freeing up 11.5 touches per game that now need to find a new home. And without Mike Boone and Chase Edmonds likely to be available anytime soon, it seems Latavius Murray is suddenly a workhorse, a 3-down workhorse, which is really, really hard to find come week 12 of the fantasy football season. It'll feel gross putting him in your lineup, but Latavius Murray is a rock-solid RB2 with some pretty legitimate RB1 upside when things break right in good matchups or if he's going to get usage in the receiving game. Now, you shouldn't rule out the possibility of Denver signing a free agent. But you also, another name to keep an eye on is Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack is the only other active running back on the Denver Broncos roster. And if the Denver Broncos are committed, or they insist on using 2 running backs in their scheme, Marlon Mack appears to be the next man up. So Latavius Murray is the one player in fantasy football this week that I would consider using waiver priority or blind bidding dollars on. And again, keep in mind your own league settings. He might not even be available in your league, or maybe you're in a super shallow league where he's like the 5th best player available. But keep that in mind. I'm talking about typically pretty standard leagues, like 10 to 12 team leagues with, 13, 14, 15 roster spots. Okay. The next name on this list, or by the way, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 running backs on this list for you to consider. Hopping over to wide receivers, I want to highlight Paris Campbell. So this is somebody who was actually on the list last week, and he strengthened his case as a waiver claim this week. Now, he is not somebody most likely that I would end up using a waiver priority on unless I'm absolutely desperate at wide receiver and I need some sort of answer. But otherwise, I'm just getting up early on Wednesday morning. Paris Campbell is 40% rostered in Yahoo leagues, so he's available in 6 out of 10 leagues. And he has 11 or more PPR points, 6 or more targets, 5 or more catches, and 57 or more yards in each of the last 4 games that he's played with Matt Ryan, plus 3 touchdowns to go along with it. He has scored 18 or more PPR points in 3 of the last 4 games he's played with Matt Ryan, and he is a must add in PPR leagues. I can't remember who it was, and I wish I could because they deserve credit for this. But I saw somewhere on Twitter the other day, someone said something along the lines of, dare I call Paris Campbell a 2022 league winner? And I have to say, I think he's a legitimate dark horse, at least in PPR leagues. He is a must-add in PPR leagues. There's no reason this guy should be less than 70% rostered at this point. Another name to highlight, Jamison Williams, is a very exciting rookie and a name you haven't heard yet this season. He is 23% rostered in Yahoo leagues, and on Monday, Jamison Williams was designated to return from injured reserve, which opens up a 21-day practice window, meaning he would need to be activated to the active roster within 3 weeks of today, which is when I'm recording this, or yesterday, assuming you're listening to this on Tuesday morning. Now, candidly, it's very unlikely that a rookie wide receiver that is coming off a torn ACL and beginning his season after week 12, it's very, very unlikely that that player makes significant fantasy noise. It's just not a realistic probability, and for that reason, Jamison Williams is definitely not worthy of a waiver claim or any sort of waiver priority, but he is an explosive receiver. He was the 12th overall pick in this year's draft. He's one of the best prospects in this year's draft class. And he has some really, really good matchups coming up, including the Jaguars, who have allowed the 11th most PPR points per game to wide receivers, the Vikings, who have allowed the 3rd most, and the Panthers, who have allowed the 9th most. They play those 3 teams in 3 of the last 5 games, and as we've seen all year, Detroit's defense is so bad that they are constantly finding themselves in shootouts where they need to throw the ball 30, 40-plus times a game like they will this week against the Bills on Thanksgiving. All of that is typically a good thing for wide receivers. If they find themselves in a scenario with elevated passing volume, Jamison Williams could absolutely splash onto the scene here in 2022. He's not worth a priority or worth a claim, but there's so much upside there with a receiver like Jamison Williams that it can't hurt to put him on your bench if, of course, you have the roster space for him. All right, as for the wide receivers, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. 10 total wide receivers on this list for you to consider adding to your Week 12 lineups before, after waivers run and before everything kicks off. Now, I wanted to cover a couple other options that I consider streamers for this week. So starting with quarterback, I have 3 names on the list. I'll just cover one for time purposes today. But Jared Goff is 51% rostered in Yahoo leagues, and yeah, I know we're a long ways away from the days of Jared Goff scoring, 26 plus fantasy points twice in the span of 3 weeks between weeks 2 and 4. But he does have a chance to rack up some numbers in garbage time on Thanksgiving morning while the rest of us are eating breakfast. The Buffalo Bills are coming back to town as 9-point favorites, and they should have no issues pouring a ton of points on Detroit's Swiss cheese defense, meaning Jared Goff is likely going to have to throw the ball a heck of a lot more than the 32.7 pass attempts per game that he's currently averaging. And the Lions themselves, well, they have an implied total of 22 points, which is actually the 14th highest on the 32-team slate. So they are in the upper echelon. They are in the top half of implied scoring totals in football this week. Now, the matchup itself, it's certainly not roses, it's not sparkles, it's not candy. The Bills are pretty tough on quarterbacks. They're holding them to the 4th fewest fantasy points per game, but they've been decimated by injuries to the point of 4 different quarterbacks in the last 5 games against the Bills have been able to score 15 or more fantasy points against them. So it won't feel great. It'll feel pretty gross. But as far as quarterback streamers go this week, if you find yourself in a pinch and needing somebody, I'm looking at you, Justin Fields managers, or maybe if Kyler Murray's going to miss another week, Jared Goff is at least on the radar as a streamer. And like I mentioned, I do have 2 other names on this list as potential quarterback options for you. Now, also in that game, and looking at streamers, going down to tight ends. Now, this one's not really fair for me to mention. Dawson Knox. It's not fair to mention because he's 71% rostered, which I was surprised to see that he's still so highly rostered considering how ineffective he's been all season. But he is available in roughly 3 out of every 10 leagues. And over the last 2 weeks, he has 13 targets, 11 catches, and 127 yards, which comes out to 23.7 PPR points. And now his Week 12 opponent, like we were just talking about, is the Detroit Lions, who have a terrible defense to begin with. And they came into Week 11 allowing the 2nd most PPR points per game to tight ends, including the most touchdowns per game, which is exactly where Dawson Knox butters his bread. If ever there is a week to bet on Dawson Knox scoring a touchdown, it's Week 12 on Thanksgiving in Detroit against the Lions. I have 2 other names on this list to consider as far as tight ends go if you're in a pinch for a streamer. The last one that I'll mention is I do also put defenses on here. And the defense, I have 4 on this list, and the first one that I'll mention, and the only one that I'll mention for the purposes of time today, is the Kansas City Chiefs defense. Now, this is assuming I can't get the 49ers, who are 96% rostered, or the Cowboys, who are 91% rostered. And if I can't get those teams, then I'm looking at the Kansas City Chiefs first and foremost. The Chiefs are 47% rostered, so they should be available in half of your leagues. And their opponent is the LA Rams, who have been such a letdown this year that this week they opened the Week 12 slate with just an implied total of just 14.75 points, which is easily the fewest on the entire 32-team slate. For comparison, the Carolina Panthers have the 2nd lowest implied total on the 32-team slate, and theirs is 16.25 points, and the Rams are checking it at 14.75. Now, I will mention that Matthew Stafford is in concussion protocol, and Vegas is certainly taking that into account. This implied total could certainly climb if it looks more and more likely that Stafford is going to give it a go, especially with how easy it is to put points on the Chiefs' defense as teams are chasing them all over the field trying to keep up. If that happens, the next defense on this list that I would consider is the Denver Broncos. Now, the Broncos are rostered in 63% of leagues, and they are going up against the Carolina Panthers, who have the second lowest implied total on the 32-team slate with 16.25 points. And what the heck, we'll throw a third one in here. If both of those are rostered or the Rams total starts to climb, I have my eye on the Miami Dolphins. who are rostered in just 25% of Yahoo leagues. Now, their opponent is the Houston Texans, and their implied total is just 16.5 points this week, which is the third fewest on the 32-team slate. So for those of you who are defense streamers like I am, this is a great-looking week for possibilities. I have 4 names on this list, and if somehow that's not enough for you, I always put together a streamer cheat sheet for my subscribers that makes it really easy for them to see, here's the quarterbacks, tight ends, defenses, and kickers that I would recommend if you're in a pinch and you need somebody to fill the spot. So hopefully that helps. Like I said, there are 27 different names on this list, and the link to the list is right in the description of this episode. Don't worry, it's not gated behind a paywall. It's completely free content. Give it a look, compare it to your current roster, and decide which players make sense for you to grab both before and after waivers run. And by the way, if you are into this sort of analysis, if you dig what you're hearing, if you like what you're seeing, you probably would be into the same weekly package that all 250 plus of my subscribers are getting from me on a weekly basis. First and foremost, they are getting a tool that I create, which is it's called the heat map, which, long story short, it has a thorough written analysis, a matchup analysis for 250 plus players every week. Anybody that you're possibly considering in your critical start-sit decisions, I have a full-blown analysis for that player every single week. We're talking every player, every game, every week. So my subscribers are getting that from me every single week. They're also getting access to our members-only community, which is a Discord channel full of subscribers that are dedicated to helping each other win. And it's basically a place for you to crowdsource your tough decisions so that you have more confidence when you're making them. When you're in that Discord, that means you're also getting live recommendations sent to your phone as soon as news breaks or injuries happen. You'll get a notification from me that says, hey, go beat your friends, go beat your competition to the waiver wire and pick up Marlon Mack, for example. You are going to get a weekly touchdown regression cheat sheet, which is a mathematical prediction of who is and is not the most likely to score touchdowns in the upcoming week. For example, this past week we had Donovan Peoples-Jones, Jonathan Taylor, and Darnell Mooney on that list, each of which hit pay dirt this week. And last but not least, you are going to get that weekly streamers cheat sheet to help you plug in, fill gaps with your quarterback, tight end, defense, and kicker. And you're also going to get weekly rankings when you just can't decide on 2 players and you need that coin flip. Weekly rankings usually help you do that. So all of that is bundled and packaged and rolled out to my 250 plus subscribers each and every week. And the only thing that I ask in return is that they buy me a beer each month so that it's worth it. Seriously, all I ask for is 1 beer per month, and you get all of that stuff delivered to you every single week to help you make really, really critical fantasy football decisions and, frankly, win more. Okay? So that's a wrap for today's show. Again, there is not going to be my typical show on Friday because of the holiday. Instead, in lieu of the show, I promised you a special offer. So what I do want to offer people who gave this a listen or gave this a watch, if you're watching this on YouTube, typically the subscriber package is $5.69 per month. That whole package that I talked about rolling out to you every single week, typically that's $5.69 per month. The special offer that I'm willing to roll out to podcast listeners and YouTube watchers is for the rest of the year, I will roll out all of that to you every single week for $1 per month. That's it. So you went from buying me a beer every month to buying me a McDonald's hash brown or a McDonald's large Coke, which I'll take it. Those things are delicious. $1 per month for the rest of the year. That's it. And you're going to get all of this stuff from me every single week. The only thing you need to do to take advantage is send me an email at mikey@basementbrewedff.com. Or send me a DM on Twitter, which is where I hang out most of the week as I'm putting these resources together. You can find me on Twitter at BBFFMikey, and I'll put these links these links will be in the description of the episode as well. But yeah, just send me an email, shoot me a DM on Twitter. Let me know where you heard this, where where you're coming from, and that you heard about this offer in the podcast, and I will in return hand you over everything that I spend 50 plus hours a week on for $1 per month. That's it. All right, so I won't be back on Friday, but I will be back on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, I will be back with the Week 13 version of this very episode, players to add both before and after waivers run. So expect that episode coming out on Tuesday. Until then, please come hang out with me on Twitter and TikTok. I'm at BBFFMikey on both. And also, if you're not interested in subscribing, but you dig the content and you want a free way to help a small business, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, and review, and DM me to tell me how much you love or hate the show and why. All feedback is good feedback. Anything that helps me improve my craft. Those are free ways that you can support a teeny tiny business and a family man just trying to keep food on the table for the family. But other than that, I want you guys to have the best possible Thanksgiving. I am genuinely thankful for each one of you that took the time to listen to this, that continue to do so every single week. I'm telling you, I'm waking up every day, I'm making a pot of decaf, and I'm going downstairs and I'm doing something I love for 10 hours a day. Let's be honest, 12 to 14 hours a day, every single day, and I have all of you to thank for that. I can't thank you enough for being here, and on this Thanksgiving, I'm thankful for all of you. I'm grateful for you, and I hope you guys have the best possible Thanksgiving, the best Thanksgiving you've ever had in your life. Hopefully you're not stuck eating, overrated Thanksgiving dinner and turkey, and hopefully you do actually something that's good and yummy for Thanksgiving. But if not, either way, I hope you have an awesome Thanksgiving, and cheers. This brew's for you.